Welcome to Fix It for Josh's Sake. Today I'm going to work on this 1972 Arctic Cat Lynx. The brake assembly on this is seized up, and so come along with me as we fix it for Josh's sake. Let me show you what I'm dealing with here. First of all, we got our brake lever right here, and as you notice, it is not moving at all. Okay, so let's flip the hood up. We got the brake line coming right here. You can see the assembly right there. Okay, well, when we pull on this lever, we can see the brake line flexing. See that? So I am under the impression this line is good, and our real culprit is down here in the actual caliper. So on today's episode of Fix It for Josh's Sake, I'm going to take this caliper all apart, clean it up, and put it back together and see if we can't get ourselves a good braking mechanism on this 1972 Arctic Cat Lynx. Come on with me as we fix it for Josh's sake. When you're looking at your brake, the first thing you want to check is look in here and make sure that there is a bead on the end of that cable. And you can see this silver bead in there, the gray bead in there. If that bead's not there, your cable is actually snapped in here, which happens. And that is something that is definitely possible when your brakes stop working. The second thing you want to start looking at is your brake line all the way around here, and you want to make sure that this housing is good. There can't be any cracks in this. There can't be any areas where the plastic is deteriorated or worn away, because that will allow moisture and corrosion to get into that cable. Then when we take a closer look at this mechanism, we can see here how the cable comes in right there on a 1/4-20 bolt, and the end of the cable has a clip in it right here. But I don't think any of that's our problem today. I think our problem is up in here. We have a mechanism here that's supposed to flex and flow and make this braking unit work better. So I'm going to take this apart, clean it all up, and see if we can get it functioning better. You know, when you got a stuck pig, the first thing you got to figure out is what is the pig stuck in the first place. So like I always do in all my other videos, I'm going to get myself some penetrating oil here, and I'm going to spray that right here on this particular collar nut, and here on these bolts, maybe on those bolts down there. Heck, let's even spray some there, and we're going to let that soak in for a little bit. See if we can't get this stuck pig unstuck. Now that that's been soaking in penetrating oil for a while, grab yourself a 1/2-inch open end box end wrench, and we're going to go ahead and crack this nut loose right here. And there's also the same size nut on the bottom there. We need to get that opened up so that we can slide that away from the brake assembly. In this particular situation, getting this apart is a lot easier. The cable just comes over and comes out. It's a lot easier to take it out than it will be to put it back together, because when we put it back together, we've got this spring mechanism here, and that can be a bit difficult to get compressed, but we're going to worry about that later. Getting the cable off of this brake assembly isn't too hard. We got a spring here, and we just pull the cable off to the side, and boom, pops out. Make sure you're holding onto this spring, or you might be digging around your shop or the bottom of your belly pan, or who knows for it. But okay, that came off. The end of the brake cable looks like that. It needs to look like that. If it doesn't have this ball on it, that could be the reason why your brake isn't working either. Well, now that I have that cable off, this mechanism is moving pretty good, and I don't see much of a problem here. So I think my problem with the brakes not functioning is in that cable housing, to my surprise. But I'm still going to take this all off. I want to clean this up really good, see how the brake pads look, make sure everything is durable and has some life in it. If any parts are worn out, I'm going to replace them. In order to get this brake caliper off, grab yourself a 1/2-inch wrench or socket and break these loose so that we can take them off of the chain case. Today's sponsor is French Onion Dip. Go ahead and put yourself a container somewhere nearby where you're working, and drop those bolts and washers and collars and nuts and all the things that you're working on. Drop them into a nice little tub like that. so you don't lose your parts, right? Unless you were recently in your brake mechanism on your snowmobile, you're probably going to find a lot of grime and gunk and grease. So get yourself a rag, clean this bracket up really good. If it's a job worth doing, it's worth doing well. So get this nice and cleaned up. Now we're going to go work on that brake caliper. If you've been watching my videos for any duration of time, you'll probably figure out pretty quickly that I kind of preach the same things over and over and over. Like, here's a stainless steel little disposable brush. Here's a smaller one. I get these from your local stores like Home Depot, Menards, Harbor Freight, or something like that. But a brush like this, and again, a little penetrating oil to kind of break up the grease and the grime. Works pretty good for getting that dirt and stuff to become soft and soluble, so that we can go ahead and scrub it off with a brush here. You can call me a perfectionist if you want, but I scrubbed around on this pretty good with the penetrating oil, some stainless steel brushes. I think I can get that a little bit cleaner, but I'm gonna have to shift gears, and I'm gonna go into my kitchen and grab some 505. Don't tell anybody that I'm cleaning this up in my kitchen sink, but I know full well with some hot water and some 505 and a scrub brush in my sink, this is going to get really clean. What's nice about using this Zep 505 is when you're done with your project, you can give the sink a little squirt down and let that soak for a minute or two and wash up your sink. So it's a win-win for everybody. I've got this brake assembly all cleaned up, looking pretty good. So I'm going to head back out to the snowmobile and start working on that. Well, that cleaned up real nice, and I was debating on just leaving it like this, but I just can't leave this crusty, rusty stuff here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull these two bolts out of these two nuts and take this metal plate off, this metal bracket, and I'm going to give that a coat of primer and paint so that we don't have any more rust or crud or anything growing on this brake assembly. So to get these apart, we're going to need a 1/4 inch Allen wrench to go into the head right there, and again a 1/2 inch wrench to go in right here. The way I like to do it is I put my Allen wrench on the desk or on the workbench, and then push down on it and then move the wrench like this, and that way that brake caliper stays in place as we loosen up this lock nut. But this lock nut's going to stay tight all the way through, because it's doing exactly what it says, locking on those threads a little bit, holding tension so it doesn't ever come loose when we need those brakes to be there. Once we've got that nut loose, we got the nut, we got a collar, and that bolt comes out, and the head of it is a collar, and that's all the pieces to that assembly. So pay attention to those 3 pieces when you're taking it apart. The bottom will just be a rinse and repeat. Put pressure on it, turn that lock nut loose, everything will come apart. Wahoo. Here's the fun part. Pull out the bolt, and then we can see what we got here. This is the floating brake pad, and then this is the stationary one with a pad glued into it. And then here's the other side of the assembly. And when we work this brake, you can see those pins coming in and out. That's what's pressing on this brake pad. So that's how the mechanism works. All that has to be flowing freely and functioning properly for your brakes to slow down the secondary clutch on your snowmobile. Also pay attention to a spring in there. There's a spring right in there. Make sure that spring is in there, not broken, crushed, or anything like that, or corroded. Make sure that's moving good too. Alright, I just went through and scrubbed that down with a stainless steel brush, wiped it off good, and then wiped it down with some isopropyl alcohol in order to make sure that there's no oil or residue left on this metal. And now I'm going to shake myself up a can of rust reformer primer to dig into this metal and make sure this rust doesn't grow anymore, and then we'll put a coat of paint on it. Time for paint. let's go ahead and rinse and repeat on the other side. Oh yeah, looking better than new. Now that that rust reformer has dried well, I'm going to use some appliance epoxy. This is the same paint that I used on the gas tank on this Arctic Cat Lynx, and it does a good job of resisting gas spillage and not bubbling or peeling off when gas gets on it. I was debating either using this or some high heat resistant black paint. Well, I'm all out of high heat resistant black paint, so I'm going to use this and know that it'll do a good job of staying on there, even though this is probably going to get a little bit of oil and gas fumes and stuff like that on it as well. I mean, we're running a 2-stroke motor, so there's going to be some fumes and residue under there. Well, now that that's flipped over, it's the same thing, only different. All right. Let that dry for a little bit. Man, some of these old stickers are the best. Good promotion right here, good clean fun. Do not exceed 130 miles per hour unless using Le Mans racing parts. I mean, I would love to see this cool old sled go 130 miles an hour. But first I better make sure it stops good. So I got the brake cable right here, and I sprayed some penetrating oil down into here to get this casing to start to loosen up. And I'm holding it up like that by kind of clipping it onto the brake assembly here, the brake lever. But I want to see what's going on with the rest of it. It's a little crusty right there, so we got to get it apart. What I did is I grabbed myself this fancy little pronged tool. It's not a screwdriver, it's something else for pulling out like finishing nails or small headed nails when doing carpentry. And so you're gonna need something like that to get into here and pull off these collars. And you kind of work them forward and they'll come off with a little love and gentleness. Just take your time, because that's a plastic pin and we do not want to break that off. I guess there's always options, right? We can always figure out a way to fix it. Bolts, nuts, wire, zip ties. But I kind of like to keep these intact. So I'm going to use this tool to pull those off and we'll see how it goes. The proof is in the pudding. I would say for these particular clips and collars, get yourself one of these tools. They work really well for pulling those off. Everyone knows a cat has 9 lives. Looks like this Arctic Cat Lynx knew it and put it right on its handlebar wrap. There it is. So I got the pins out, and then this piece just peels up like this. Comes off the bars. And now we can see this clip, and we can come in here real clearly and get this brake cable apart and dump some penetrating oil down inside of there. So we're gonna have to do a couple of things with this cable. First thing we need to do is pull it back so that it actually can come out of the housing here. So it needs a little slack to do that. And then once it clears, which might be easier said than done, then we can pull it out of the other section. Give me a second here. The reality is I needed to switch hands. You got to pull pretty good, then the cable comes forward, and then the cable will push into the lever here, and once it pushes into the lever, it'll come loose inside of here and fall forward. The best way to get this cable to come forward is to stick a screwdriver in here and just pry it forward. Let me see if I can give you a shot of that so that you can see what I'm talking about. We're going to come in like this, And I'll bring you right in there, and you can see the mechanism right there, and it just pops up, pops forward. Okay, we're almost home free. Last detail we're going to have to do is we have to remove this pin, then this whole brake assembly will come away and we can get that cable out. The main thing to focus on is the bottom of this pin. It's got a ring clip on it, so we got to take that off. Be really careful. It's very small. It's in a very small slot on the bottom of this pin, and there's a good chance that thing can go flying into nowhere and evaporate. So take your time, keep your hand over it as you pop it off. If anybody has any hints on the easy way to take these off, let me know. But what I do is I do take a small little tip like that. I know this tool has been getting a lot of attention in this particular section of the video, but it'll let me get in the back of the clip here and pull out, and then I can hold on to it and not lose it as I pull it out. So to me, you got to get yourself a little screwdriver or something with a little pin, and you can pull out the back of the clip. I swear this is the last time you're going to see me use this tool on here. Probably not, but it works really well. We're just going to go ahead and grab the top of the pin, and we're going to pull up like that, and that pin will work right up. And you can grab onto it, and then once it comes forward and out of the way, now we've got ourselves the brake cable with that little ball on the end of it. What do I got cooking in here? Let's see. I wish it was a pizza, but I did put my brake caliper bracket in the oven at 350, which is the lowest temperature this oven goes in. And I did that for 30 minutes. Not uninformed. See, epoxy paint is not dangerously flammable at normal temperatures like 350. So I wanted this to cure out quickly. I went ahead and popped it in the oven for 30 minutes. And now I'm ready to bolt everything together. I'm pretty happy with that epoxy paint. It coated this really well, and I think we're going to set some rust at bay for quite a long time. Wanted to look at some of these other things here and show you what I got. We got this cleaned up really nice, and I'm real confident that this is going to do a good job for a long time. The spring that's down in there looks really good. There's no weird rounded out wear or obnoxiousness anywhere in here where this brake pad sits or where the pins that push on the brake pad sit. The metal plate that sits behind the brake pad, that's in good condition. That's not wore through or wore out or dented or anything, so that looks good. The other thing I do want to point out, though, is we've got this part. This is the back side of the brake assembly. It looks to me like something came in here. Let me get back a little bit so it focuses, and made a chip right there on this brake pad. So I'm not too nervous. I've got a lot of meat here. It's going to grab and hold. But I am going to put another one on order, and just be aware that eventually I'm going to want to replace this pad. But these are the kind of things you're inspecting for a rock, or who knows what that was that got in there and chipped that out. Maybe that's just a manufacturing defect. I kind of doubt it, though. But everything looks good. I'll also check these pins. Make sure these don't have any weird ribs or abnormalities worn into them as well. So I would give this brake system a clear bill of health, and I'm ready to put it together. The first thing I'm going to do is grab my grease here and get a little bit on the brush like that, and I'm going to grease these pins. Now the way they work is the rounded part faces the back, and it rides on these ridges right here. So make sure you get these set the right way. The flat piece, while I drop it, the flat piece is going to sit against the brake pad, and the rounded piece is going to ride against the brake arm. Because I want to make sure this stays moisture free, I'm just going to put a little bit of grease in here, and that will help everything move freely. And then I can set my pad into here like this, and then I will set my actual brake pad. I know I called that last thing the pad, but that was a metal plate. And I would highly recommend making sure you have that metal plate, because that helps keep the pressure uniform on this brake pad. Once you got the pad in there and you got the pins in, give it a little movement in and out and make sure everything is really smooth. There's no catching or dragging or anything. You want this to work really nice. For the next step of bolting this to this, just make sure you have everything oriented correctly. This is where the cable pulls up, so this arm has to be in line with that to be able to pull up. And then we're going to grease the head of this Allen bolt, and we're going to grease this collar, because that's what slides in and out of the holes in this bracket, and we want them to have play so that the brake caliper can float properly when it's gripping onto the clutch. I'll try to do this as smooth as possible, but essentially we need some grease on here, and that will come through like this and go into the bolt there, and then this bracket needs to be there, come through. So now that bolt head is there, and then we want to put a little grease on this and pop that into here. Then we're going to put a nut on there, and that's one down. For the second one, it's the same, only different. I'm going to put a little grease on there. It's probably not necessary, but I'm going to do it anyway. I did it on the other bolt, just didn't show it on the camera. But I'm going to grease that shaft up too, partly because I just want to keep any potential corrosion or rust from growing in this brake assembly. So that goes through like that, and then we've got to grease this and slide that into place, and then the nut goes on top. Grab your 1/4 inch Allen wrench, grab your 1/2 inch, and tighten them in from each side, and your brake assembly is back together. You already got a tool that does the job easier, grab that. This ratchet works pretty well. And again, I'm doing kind of the exact opposite of what I did when I took it apart. Take that Allen wrench, set it on the bench, push down on the brake assembly, and then use that as your leverage to pull that together. And those will snug down real nice. Same tactical work right here too on this next one. And we pull everything together. All right, we're getting all these nuts tight. And once that is tight, these lock nuts are good on the bolts there. And this plate floats like that and allows this caliper to float on the edge of the clutch. Now just go in here and make sure none of the grease that we just used to lubricate this mechanism is inside of the brake pads, because we need those brake pads to be nice, dry, and clean. We're definitely on the home stretch here, and this brake caliper goes in like that and sits down like that, and we're going to put our bolts in right here. But I do want to just mention that we should really grab ourselves some Loctite. They had red on here, which these came off really easy. So it's kind of scary to think that they had red on there, because red is supposed to be really, really, really strong. Like, I've been told you're not supposed to be able to get it loose very easily. I'm scared of red, because I pretty much believe that if something can break, it will. So I use blue. So if something breaks, like this brake caliper, I can get it off, and I can fix it, and I can put it back on. So we're going to use some blue Loctite on this. It doesn't take a lot. Just a little bit of Loctite goes a long way. We're going to screw that in there. And before we tighten it, we kind of want to get the feel of where this is going to float. We want it in the center so that it floats nicely on the clutch. And that allows us to start tightening this in and get it centered just right so that this can float and grab and do what we need it to do here. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I'm going to keep tightening those up. When it comes to tightening up these bolts right here and getting those good and snug, we do have a 1/2 inch slot right here that we can move them around on. And I just want to point out that if you have these too far this way, the brake assembly will actually max out on this nut right there. Okay, see how that works? So I have right now a good 1/8 inch of wear down space for this brake shoe to dissipate to. But if I had this whole assembly pushed this way 1/8 of an inch, I'd be maxing out on these nuts right there. So when you're getting yourself positioned and you're working this actuator arm here, make sure you're paying attention to this slot right there, because that's where you'll max out. And that's where you won't have any more travel and your brakes will get soggy and they won't slow your sled down. So pay attention to that. Well, that went together pretty nicely. We can roll the clutch and secondary clutch here and see the brake grabbing it real good. Unfortunately, I'm at a hard stop here because the brake cable that comes here and bolts onto my handlebars, it is seized, and I'm gonna have to go order myself a new one. So thanks for watching as we worked on this caliper and got this all cleaned up and looking good and found the source of the problem, and that was, you know, a brake cable that's just junk. It won't move in, it won't move out, it's seized. And I'm gonna order a new one, and that's gonna be my way of fixing it for Josh's sake. Thanks for watching along. If you liked this video or found anything interesting or insightful from it, please share it with your friends, comment, like, subscribe. Tell me how you do this and what you do to tune up these brakes good to make sure they do what they need to do to stop your sled efficiently. Thanks for watching as I fix it for Josh's sake.